for joining us tonight. Our special guest tonight is Aundrea Gomez. She'll be providing us with updates on election integrity and other concerning legislation. She is with Tennessee Fair Elections. You can reach them. You can find their site at TennesseeFairElections.org. Aundrea, thank you for being with us tonight.
Thanks, Dave.
Just give the audience a little reminder, overview of your organization, if you would.
Okay, yeah. So Tennessee Fair Elections is a statewide coalition of volunteer citizens. I've founded and I chair this group along with some other amazing folks. But we started back in 2022 in the fall. And since then, we have continued to meet and study elections year round. And we've had a couple of sessions now where we have filed legislation and worked with the General Assembly. And really just looking to identify in the state of Tennessee, what are we doing well? Where are the vulnerabilities? Where are the threats? Because even in Tennessee, there are still going to be threats to liberty, including our elections. Yep. And what do we need to do to address those vulnerabilities? Where's the leverage point for that? So that's what we've been doing for the last 2.5 years. And I think there's some things that we have discovered and learned about elections in Tennessee that would probably shock some people.
So wait a minute, well, we're number 3 nationally, right? So I mean, we're great, right? I mean, we don't have any weaknesses.
Well, the funny thing is actually that scorecard you're referring to placed Tennessee as number 1, with Georgia number 2, and we all know how messed up their elections are. So, but we still continue to hear the brag. We're number 1 in election integrity. And that scorecard really only looked at a few issues. They were looking at, does the state do a mass mail-in ballot? Like, do they mail a ballot out to every single person for them to be able to vote by mail? No, Tennessee does not do that. So we got high marks for that. Is there some sort of voter ID requirement in place? Yes, Tennessee does have some sort of voter ID requirement. It's not awesome, but we do have something in place. So we got good marks for that. And the next thing that they really honed in on was ranked choice voting. And Tennessee does not do ranked choice voting. That is a really, really big deal that we don't, and we got really high marks for that. Ranked choice voting is, we could do a whole separate talk. I don't quite have my thoughts prepared to be able to explain it because it is very confusing.
Right.
But it is definitely bad for elections and for democracy. So we scored really well on those 3 things. That got us all the way up to number 1. There are other states that just brag that they're in the top 10. So it's kind of it's not really much of a brag in my opinion. Yeah. But here we are. We've held on to that title for a couple of years, but as you know, and as probably many of your viewers know, the state of elections in our country is pretty dire. So there's really not a lot of room for bragging.
I gotcha. I agree 100%. So what bills are you guys watching this year?
So we're doing more than just watching bills. So what I'll do first, if that's okay, if I can kind of cast like the overall picture of our threat surface, and then I'll set the problem, and then I'll tell you what the solutions are for this session. So if we're talking about election integrity in any state, including Tennessee, there's several factors involved. And I'll just say, first of all, we're not talking about campaigns. Tennessee Fair Elections does not do anything with campaigns, specific races, and we really don't address party integrity. So, a lot of people are very concerned about party registration and all of that, and we're not opposed to that, but that's not our mission.
Right.
That's not our lane. We really focus on the laws and the processes that govern the actual election. So in looking at that, there's different areas of that open up for vulnerabilities. So one would be technology and reliance on machines. And I would guess that many of your viewers are very frustrated with the reliance on technology and the ballot marking devices, and there's a lack of trust, and definitely a lack of transparency. And so that's been a big focus in the last 5 years for a lot of people and a lot of groups. They've identified that as the number one vulnerability. And I would concede, yes, the technology and the machines are a huge problem, but they're not the only problem.
Right.
And so what I would want viewers to understand is that while that is an issue, fixing that issue doesn't solve everything else. So, but it is an issue, and there are a lot of issues within that issue. There's also the issue of the centralized vote casting and tabulation. And we're seeing this in Tennessee as the vote center model, the convenience vote center model, is being rolled out across our state. And so that really takes the voters out of their precinct and puts them into what they call a convenience vote center. And in order to have a convenience vote center, you really do have to have all of the machines, because you have to be able to offer hundreds of different ballot types, because, you know, you might live in one part of the county, but you're going to go vote, you know, at the vote center that's closest to your work. And so they have to be able to offer the ballot type that matches up with all of the races that you are eligible to vote in. So that's a very messy process.
Now, the county has to choose to do that, correct?
Well, so yeah, it starts with the Election Commission, and this is going on right now with a bill that we are very much opposed to, that just passed the House Elections Subcommittee last week. It's Hamblen County is the county that's doing this right now, and so first the Election Commission comes together and they just decide, they vote on wanting to implement this convenience vote center model. And then they ask the legislator to run a bill for a pilot program, and the legislature passes it. But nobody elected that election commission. The people didn't elect them. So this isn't the people asking for it. This is the election commission at the county level deciding that they want to do this. The people aren't asking for it. So let's make that distinction very clear. Okay, so that's the centralized voting and tabulation. Another vulnerability on this threat surface is the USPS absentee mail-in system. It creates vulnerabilities when you have the USPS, that chain of custody with your ballots, and the absentee process and verifying that those are actual eligible voters. And then we've got the citizen-only issue. So as our country has been flooded with illegals, and we have non-citizens. Some are here legally and some are here illegally. Right. And of course, you know, a certain former president gave them all legal status. So there's that. But we do have the citizen-only voting issue. And with that comes this process at the polls, because we don't require proof of citizenship at the registration, at voter registration. Okay, the NVRA prohibits us from requiring proof at voter registration. So now we've got to figure out, when are we going to determine if this person should be on the voter rolls? Are we doing that? I would suggest that in Tennessee, we are not doing a good enough job at making sure that the people that make it onto the voter rolls are actual citizens.
Okay, now back up just a second here, just so I'm straight. So verifying their citizenship is done where? Done at what point in the process?
It should be done before they're put on the voter roll. So they can fill out the voter registration card.
Right.
On that card, they just answer a question that says, "Are you a U.S. citizen?" They answer yes or no. That's it.
And they don't have to prove that. They don't have to show anything. Federal
law prohibits the states from requiring proof when they fill that out. Now, there is legislation in Congress called the SAVE Act.
Right.
It's a bill from Chip Roy, and we need that to pass, because that makes changes and amends the NVRA so that states can require proof. but currently they cannot. Now, so then,
can they not do it for their state elections? They can't.
So Arizona was able to do that, and they now do require proof of citizenship for their state elections. Tennessee has not had an appetite to do that.
So so in Arizona, and I understand you're covering Tennessee, but just hypothetically here, if we had that law and we can verify for the state election, well, okay, now we've proven this person, hey, you're not eligible to vote in the state election, so then we could prevent them from voting in the federal election, right?
No. So in Arizona, they have a bifurcated ballot. So you can only get the Arizona state ballot if you're proving that you are a citizen. If you have not proven you're a citizen, then you get a federal only ballot.
Yeah, that's the reason I like nullification, but that's a whole different topic.
Yeah, I agree. Nullification applies on a lot of things. Okay. So anyhow, going back to your question though, then once they have filled out that voter registration card, our election commission offices should be verifying that they're a citizen before they actually put them on the voter rolls. I don't know that that's consistently happening across the state. Every county is responsible for that. I think some counties are probably doing a fantastic job at that. I think there's other counties that are overwhelmed with other activities.
How do they do it? What do they use to do that?
They're supposed to use some state databases to determine.
Okay. Yeah, I'm sure. I'm sure ours is top. I'm sure that's number one. I'm sure we're number one in that too, no doubt.
So then, so then we're left with, okay, if it doesn't get caught at the election commission office at the county level and they end up on the voter rolls, then certainly when they get to the poll to actually cast a vote, we should have some training in place to make sure that a non-citizen doesn't get an opportunity to vote. We do not have that training in place. So one of our bills this session, it's actually going to be heard in the subcommittee tomorrow, is to require that training so that poll workers are trained on how to discern if this person in front of them is eligible, if they are an actual citizen. If they're not a citizen, or they do not have any identification that shows that they are a citizen, then they are to be given a provisional ballot. And a provisional ballot it's a paper ballot. It gets put in a separate bin. And then if there's for some reason, maybe there was possibly a mistake, that individual has, I think, 48 hours to prove that they're a citizen. They can come back to the election commission office and say, okay, here's my proof of citizenship. And then they can go ahead and cast their ballot. So currently we don't have any training along those lines for our poll workers. They don't know anything about it. They don't know that when they look at and this goes back to the voter ID. Okay. So we are told we have voter ID in Tennessee. Well, okay. We allow expired licenses to be used to vote in Tennessee. Did you know that?
No, I didn't know that.
We also allow people to use an ID that does not show their residency. It doesn't show where they live.
That's not an ID. That's
right.
Just a photo, right?
Exactly. We have facial recognition in Tennessee.
But we're number one.
We're not actually, yeah.
Right.
So currently a non-citizen can get a temporary license to drive. And it says temporary across the top, and that indicates that that person is not a citizen. But the poll workers are told not to use that information at the polls. They're not trained to identify that as a non-citizen.
I thought we had legislation on that last year. Did that, and I wasn't sure of the status of it. I thought Representative Barrett carried something having to do with that. And so I take it that didn't make it through then.
It didn't make it through. And I don't know if it's going to make it through this year either. There's a lot going on. This is a very strange session. I don't know if that's your experience, but that's my experience. Okay. So other vulnerabilities, other threats to our elections. So eligibility of voters, like such as the voter rolls, making sure our voter rolls are clean and they're updated and only eligible voters are on there. That's a vulnerability. How is that being done? The overseas voter, okay, is another vulnerability. Not just Tennessee, I'm talking across the country too, right? The overseas voter. Now this is really interesting. UOCAVA is federal legislation, I think it's under HAVA, that allows an overseas voter, so a military or a non-military individual that lives in another country, to register for an absentee ballot so they can vote in elections. No problem. The problem is that Tennessee does not require those individuals to have ever even lived in the state of Tennessee.
Good Lord. I could kind of see that on the military side, if you were like stationed at Tullahoma or something. And really, even Fort Campbell, I mean, the post office is in Kentucky, but a good chunk of it's in Tennessee. But a lot of the people live in Tennessee. But that's just insane. That's.
But I'm not talking about military that are in Tennessee. I'm talking about they live in another country.
Right.
They're registering for an absentee ballot, and they don't have to prove that they've ever even lived. They don't have to have ever lived in Tennessee in order to get that ballot. So you have people registering for a ballot in Tennessee to vote in your local elections. I mean, how do you just determine what district? So they're just putting down an address, and they've never lived at that address. Maybe they know someone else who has lived at that address, but they're now going to vote in your state House and Senate district. What about your school board and your county commission?
That is the stupidest thing I've ever heard.
It's just one of those things that most people don't even realize. And now what we have determined is, this isn't a Tennessee statistic, it's a national statistic, but in 2022, over 60% of the voters that voted with that military overseas UOCAVA ballot, they were non-military. So the number of non-military voters is on the rise. And if we're not able to determine that they're actually eligible and that they've ever had some sort of connection to the state of Tennessee, that's a huge vulnerability.
Right. Well, do they have to prove they're in the military even?
That's a good question. I believe they do. They somehow have to fill out that ballot and prove their identity. I don't know exactly what the ballot requires them to put down regarding the military. They don't have to be in the military, because it's for military, it's for overseas citizens, and also dependents of military.
Right.
So if your spouse or whatever, but we just have people maybe who, like maybe Rosie O'Donnell, she's left the country and she's now living in Ireland. Maybe she still is going to try to vote here. I don't know, but she's not military.
Yeah.
Okay, so then additional vulnerabilities and threats. So I mentioned the training, the transparency, the hostility to transparency. That's like public records request, hostility towards poll watchers. We've had in multiple counties across the state, we've had the poll workers, the election commission, and even the county parties just be hostile towards the idea of having poll watchers in the polls. And by law, the Tennessee Code says that they have a right to be there. So that hostility is not okay, and it's a vulnerability. We've had problems getting cast vote records, and then of course there's the issue with the audits. You know that when you vote in a vote center and you're bringing all of those different precincts together, and one machine that's capturing all those ballots could be housing ballots from multiple precincts. You can't do a precinct audit when people are voting in vote centers.
Right.
And a precinct audit is what the law says. So unless you go in there and you're now dividing up and, separating out all of these ballots and handling all these ballots. You can't get in there and do an audit without doing that. And I would say we should be just voting in the precincts from the beginning so that we can quickly, easily, and accurately audit those ballots.
Why the push to the vote centers? What's the push behind the vote? What's the thought behind that? What's wrong with voting the old-fashioned way in your own precinct?
Well, it's the centralization of everything. When you can centralize the voting and the tabulation, then you can centralize the control.
Okay. Yeah.
They tell us it's for convenience. But
whose convenience?
Yeah, I think it's their convenience. But if you're voting in a vote center, and what we would suggest is that if you're voting in a precinct, we would suggest that your precinct size be about 1,500 people. So that's going to be people that live in your neighborhood, in your community. You're going to know a lot of them, right? You're going to recognize if there's somebody in the precinct. The poll workers should be able to recognize people that maybe don't belong there. Right. So there's a local control over that. And then also you can tabulate your results without the government involvement. I mean, you can execute your election and have your results and even do an audit for your precinct if necessary, and never have anything online and never have anything that's vulnerable to any nefarious activities. It makes perfect sense to you and me, but I guess they must think that they need to do something to be more and more to keep the counties and the people more and more reliant on the government. Also, you don't have to have all the machines if you're in a precinct, but you can really make a good case for having all of the technology if you're in a vote center.
Right. Right.
It's really easy to do the gold standard of a precinct, in-precinct voting with a secure hand-marked paper ballot. That's a really simple, straightforward, transparent election with voter ID. But when you go to a vote center, now you can make a case for all of these extra layers that are necessary to be able to execute that election. And if we were doing our elections on one day or maybe 3 days,
yeah,
we wouldn't feel so stretched with the poll workers or even the poll watchers. If we were doing, 1 to 3 days of voting, Trump says he wants 1 day. I would be okay with up to 3, but we're currently doing 10, and some states are doing like a whole season.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
Certainly, yeah.
I'm with you. 1 day, I could accept 3, but 1 day is fine. It worked fine for years. Other countries have elections in 1 day, and they get everything tabulated. But we act like in our state, oh well, we couldn't possibly do that. That's garbage.
Yes, it is. We definitely have some influences, and that's one of the things that confounds all of this. So I laid out the issues, those vulnerabilities, and then you confound that with legislative loopholes. So parts of our Tennessee code that are old and outdated, things that were written before the internet was even a thing. And then we also have these third-party influencers. We've got vendors and we have NGOs that are influencing at the county level and at the state level. So now it's this whole mess of vulnerabilities. So we had some solutions this session. Of course, we all want the machines to go away. Yep. There is not an audience for that currently in our General Assembly. And you and I have discussed this before. We have a supposed supermajority of Republicans. We've got a Republican governor and a Republican House and a Republican Senate. And yet it's really difficult to get good, solid, conservative legislation passed. They are not open to eliminating the voting machines. So what are some of the solutions that we offered? We had a bill for adding a secure watermark to the ballot. because currently our machines, they have paper, right? Many
Right.
of the machines have paper, not so like my county uses the ES&S machine, and it's just stacks of blank ballots. There's nothing secure about that paper. So when a legislator says, oh, we can't go to a hand-marked paper ballot, that's going to even cause more cheating, and that's more insecure. Well, we already have insecure ballots right now because nothing's accounted for. We don't know how many ballots we start the election with, how many we end them with. They're not serialized. They're not marked in any way, shape, or form. They're just blank ballots.
That's crazy. I mean,
So we
I would have thought that you would have been issued ballots based on your numbers, maybe with a little overage just in case, but
yeah, exactly. Like if you're doing tiling your house, you need an extra 10% just in case.
Right.
So if we were in precincts, you could anticipate by looking at your voter roll, how many registered voters. This is how many ballots I need to have to accommodate all of them. I need an extra 10 or 15% just in case someone spoils their ballot and needs a new one.
Right.
All of those things. And so you can account for all of that when you're in a precinct. It makes it very simple. They could be serialized, they could be watermarked. There's lots of different ways that you can secure the ballot. I just lost my train of thought. I forgot what I was going to say.
That's okay.
Oh,
it'll come around.
The QR code, the QR codes. So currently with the ES&S machines and many of the others as well from different vendors, when it prints your ballot, there's human readable text on there, but that's not what the tabulator reads. It reads a QR code or a barcode, right? And so you go and walk over to the tabulator and you feed your ballot in. It's not reading the print, it's reading the barcode or the QR code. So the bill that we proposed was to put a watermark on there and then to, over time, phase out the reliance on the barcode or the QR code. And so as they're, purchasing more tabulators, which are required by law in Tennessee, those tabulators will be required to read the human readable text so that the machine is reading exactly what the voter is able to read.
Right.
You and I can't read barcodes and QR codes, right?
Right.
That bill got a huge fiscal note attached to it. I think it was $800,000. And so that bill has been taken off notice.
Well, $800,000 is not huge in a $60 billion budget. I mean, that's not even a drop in the bucket.
But you know what happens when a bill gets a fiscal note attached. It's oftentimes done in order to kill the bill.
Oh, yeah,
so,
absolutely.
So that bill is not dead. It hasn't been voted on. And so we would prefer to not have a bill killed in committee, and so that we can work on it and bring it back, and work on committee members and so forth. So that's one. We also this is a really important one. So, well, first let me tell you, we have a voter roll bill that's just aligning our state voter roll code to match with the federal NVRA. So that's a really simple, straightforward bill, because we had some additional quiet periods that said you can't clean up voter rolls, for this additional 90 days.
Right.
That was something that was put on the books back in the 70s, and then the NVRA came along in 1993. So this bill is just kind of cleaning it up and streamlining it so that it just matches and doesn't add any additional handcuffs to the state of Tennessee. Prohibiting internet voting. Now, we know nobody wants the ballot marking devices or the tabulators to be connected to the internet, and we are told over and over and over again that they're not.
Right.
So you would think it would be a slam dunk for our conservative Republican supermajority to pass a bill that prohibits internet voting, right? Wouldn't you think?
Oh yeah, and I would think we would really have constitutional carry too, but we don't, and I'm assuming the answer is the same there. Right.
Good point. Well, so this was heard. This bill to prohibit internet voting was heard in subcommittee last week. They didn't vote on it, so it's not dead, but they did roll it to the final calendar. We're concerned they are doing this to eventually roll it to the heel, and so that they can just avoid voting on it altogether.
Right.
The problem here is that when they are sending out a ballot to those overseas voters that I mentioned earlier,
Right.
They're sending a blank ballot through the internet. Okay, that's fine. They're doing this also for individuals that have vision issues, challenges, disability. So they're allowed to send the blank ballot through the internet. This bill says they cannot return their cast ballot through the internet. The pushback we're getting from our secretary or the coordinator of elections at the state level, the pushback we're getting is that, well, those visually impaired people have to be able to use a device or, a home computer or something along those lines in order to mark their ballot. Well, here's the problem, is the moment you allow a visually impaired person or a UOCAVA voter to use their home computer to mark their ballot, you've now just made that home computer a ballot marking device, and they're not certified for that.
Wow.
But the pushback is like, oh, well, then you're going to be cutting out all of these people and they're not going to be able to vote. No, they need to vote on a hand-marked paper ballot. So let's make whatever accommodations need to be made so that they can get a hand-marked paper ballot that they can mark, maybe in large print or whatever. I've seen the accommodations for students that are visually impaired, so I know it's possible.
Right.
But they need to return that ballot in paper form.
Yep. That makes sense.
It makes sense. I'm concerned it's not going to get a vote.
You mean even get a motion in the committee or a second in the committee?
Well, it got heard. I testified on this bill last week. And here's the other, it's really the bureaucrats. They're the ones that are winning. You know this. You've seen Second Amendment bills get killed because a bureaucrat who's paid by the taxpayers comes in and testifies against your bill. Yep. And that's happening in our case as well. So it makes you question who speaks for us. If our legislators continue to acquiesce to a bureaucrat, then are they really there to represent you and I?
Yeah, and think about where we're at in that hierarchy. So it seems like with most of our legislators, not all of them, but the vast majority of them, it's like, okay, I got to do what the governor wants. I got to do what speaker wants if I'm in the Speaker of the House wants if I'm in the House. I got to do what the lieutenant governor wants if I'm the Senate. And then you got all, you don't want to make the chairman mad of the committees that you have to, get your bills through. And then of course there's all the lobbyists. And then we're down here somewhere, okay? Because number one, there's not enough of us. We don't have the money to compete, unfortunately. And so they're there supposedly to represent us, but most of them don't. And I think after they're up there a while, I don't think most of them even see it as their job to represent us. I think they stand for election and not much else, so they know all the right things to say and do at election time. And the rest of the time, they just want the path of least resistance. And if there's not enough of us to create consistent, effective resistance, to include putting up a viable candidate against them and funding them, then they don't worry about it. And we're not represented.
That's right. We have lost representative government.
Yep.
Absolutely. Okay, so still working on that internet bill. It should be heard a week from tomorrow.
What's that bill number?
Final committee.
What's the bill number?
That is HB 139.
Who's carrying it?
So it's Todd Warner, which actually adds one more layer.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Because he's been targeted, as have others,
Yep.
because he hasn't bent the knee to the cartel.
Yeah.
I'm just going to say.
You know what? Cartel is a perfect description. the political cartel of Tennessee, you know, the Rhino cartel. I guess that's what we could call it. Actually,
Yeah.
at that level, the senior ones, I could kind of consider them reptiles. The rank and file guys, they're just part of the Rhino cartel. But yeah, they are a cartel, and they definitely don't represent us.
Yeah, and if you have a backbone and you stand with your constituents,
Yep.
you're going to be targeted and told, we're just not going to pass any of your bills. You'll never get a bill passed.
Yep, that's the way they
Because
operate.
You don't comply, you're not playing the game. So,
Yep.
Okay, some additional bills. There is a bill to prohibit foreign funding in elections. So I mentioned earlier that influence, that the group of NGOs, many of them foreign funding, influencing at the county level, at the state level, and so forth. And obviously through vendors, many of those are influenced with foreign funding. So this bill is carried by Representative Tim Rudd. He's the chair of that election subcommittee, and it prohibits the foreign funding in elections. And this bill will be heard in the House full state and local committee tomorrow.
And what are the odds on this one, you think?
I think it's good. I think there's another bill out that's very similar from Representative Chris Todd. So either one, I'd like to see pass. And then I mentioned we had an update for a voter ID bill, also taken off notice because there's so much pushback from the bureaucracy up there. But that was to update to require proof of residency on the ID, to make sure the IDs were not expired, and so on and so forth. So, and then the overseas citizen voting bill also was taken off notice because of the pushback. But we wanted to require residency or some sort of connection to Tennessee.
Right.
If you're going to be overseas and voting in our elections.
So who's pushing back on that? Who doesn't want that bill?
That's your coordinator of elections.
And who is that?
Mr. Mark Goins.
Oh, I've heard that name, and I've never heard anything good about it. Okay.
Okay, so those are some of the bills that we support. There are bills that we are opposing that are important. I mentioned the vote centers. That bill is moving to the full House, state and local this week, and that puts Hamblin County in vote centers. So that is bad when we have more and more. It's like every 2 years we get additional counties going into these vote centers. And once they go into a vote center, it seems like they just can never get back out again. Right. I'm in a county that has a vote center. If your county hasn't gone to them, keep it on your radar and, cause a scene if they're going to try to do that. Someone in your county should be at those election commission meetings, listening and taking notes and finding out, and then helping, reporting to us and saying, hey, this is what's happening in our county, and we need to be raising more and more awareness about this. There's the digital ID bill that's going to be heard in House Transportation this week. That isn't directly an election integrity bill, but it is very concerning. We believe it's the camel's nose under the tent. I have issues with digital ID to begin with. And then, once you start going in that direction and you're just getting people more and more used to a digital ID, are they going to no longer have a valid ID for voting if they are now relying on a digital ID? I mean, there's just so many issues there.
Is this part of the real ID?
This is an addition. This is a digital ID. In fact, it's interesting that in these last couple of days on my social media feeds, I keep getting this advertisement for a new Tennessee app. And it's an app that you can use to kind of streamline in one place all of the government services that are available, including keeping all of your digital IDs organized.
How many digital IDs do you need?
Yeah, I don't, it is odd. I don't know. It's crazy to me that they referred to the digital IDs as more than one, but it's like they already know this bill is going to pass because it's carried by I think it's Lambert in the House and Johnson in the Senate.
The usual suspects,
something along
right?
those lines.
The usual suspects.
It actually, yeah, it actually says on the description of the app, you know, that whether you want to renew your license, search public health or public safety records, stay informed with the latest news and alerts, or add a growing number of digital licenses to your mobile wallet. So maybe fishing license, hunting license, concealed carry. I don't know. Maybe they want to put all of these in a digital form and have it on your mobile wallet. That sounds safe and secure, doesn't it?
Oh yeah, sign me up.
It's the My Tennessee app. Anyway, so we're very much opposed to that. And then I think those were the two that we're opposed to: the vote centers and the digital ID, and then the other one. So we're right now just looking at the voter roll bill, hopefully passing in the House, and the internet voting bill, which it's not looking too good. I have a feeling they're going to keep kicking that can down the road until they just kick it right on over to next session and they don't ever vote on it this session. Yeah.
Well, hey, but at least our schools are squared away, right? Right? We don't have any problems with our schools, right?
No, we're number one.
So let's talk about some of the school bills that you're concerned about. I know that's not a Tennessee fair elections issue, but I know it's an issue you're involved with and very knowledgeable of.
It is because I used to teach in Tennessee. I've been a public school teacher. I've done private school with my children. I've done homeschool with my children, and I've done online school with my children. So, but then as a former teacher, this is my wheelhouse. This is the subject I feel the most comfortable with. It's a subject I feel very passionate about. About kids learning to the best place and the best education for kids, and it is not in our schools. There's a constant threat. I don't know where the source is. I guess I don't really even want to speculate on what the intentions are. But when I read some of the bills that are coming through the Tennessee General Assembly that are focused on our children, I'm scared for the children. I'm scared for the families that aren't paying attention and looking at this through the lens of, is this even the government's role? So let's start with the Tennessee Full Service Community Schools. Now, I will start by saying this bill has already been taken off notice in the House, but that does not mean the bill is dead.
Right.
As you pointed out, it could be that there's a caption bill out there that's for an education code, and they could amend a caption bill and just it's kind of like a swap out, right? Where we're looking over here at this bill and they just go ahead and amend a caption bill over here, and then they push it through and we hardly have a second to even notice what they're doing. That's a possibility. The other possibility is that this bill can come back next session and it's still very much alive. It still could even be brought back this session. It's just not on the calendar. That's all off notice really means. Right. It doesn't mean it's dead. So Tennessee Full Service Community Schools. This is a CDC model, Center for Disease Control.
Yeah, I know what it was. I was just surprised. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So this is the whole school, whole community, whole child agenda. You and some of your viewers might remember back in 2020, we were in the height of COVID, and our former Commissioner of Education, Penny Schwinn, decided that the government should do home visits for all of the children in Tennessee up to like age 19 or something crazy. And parents pushed back, and they got so much heat over it that they tossed that entire program and that idea out, right? Well, this brings that back, but even worse. And so this sets up the public schools as a one-stop shop for everything for your child. So essentially, you can drop your child off at 7 a.m. for school. And if they need a dentist appointment, that could be done at school. If they need vaccines, that could be done at school. If they need mental health counseling, whatever it might need to be, everything is going to happen under that one roof. Now, to be fair, they already passed this in Tennessee, I believe as like a pilot program in limited counties back in 2014, before I even lived here. This bill is intended to expand it to every LEA. So every LEA, local education agency, can implement a community school model in their district.
Who's pushing this bill?
They talk about...
Who's the sponsor?
Well, the sponsor in the House is Kirk Haston, and the Senate sponsor was, I think, Richard Briggs.
Oh, good Lord. He's one of the worst in the Senate. And Hastings is a teacher, or an ex-teacher, if I'm not mistaken. Should know better, but doesn't necessarily mean he does.
No, not necessarily. And a lot of times teachers fall into the trap of a teacher knows best.
Yep.
And, this kind of elitist attitude, like, I know how these families should be, and I know how the children should be raised, and I know what needs to happen here, and, parents should be doing this and this and this, and that's not the teacher's role.
Right.
So this bill talks about pipeline services, and I'll explain what pipeline services are, but what is most, I think, grating on my nerves is when I hear people refer to parents as stakeholders. If you're the parent, you are not a stakeholder. You are not a stakeholder. You are the parent. You have the authority. You do not co-parent with other stakeholders. So that just bothers me.
This sounds like that Hillary Clinton, it takes a village garbage.
Yes, exactly what it is. That's exactly what it is. So pipeline services, like I mentioned, mental health screening and supports, vaccines, social emotional learning supports, nutrition services, and family engagement. So yeah, one-stop shop. Just drop your kid off and the government will take care of everything.
In 18 years, we'll have another little commie. Yep. We'll be good.
Yep. So again, that's off notice, but it's something to be aware of because this is the agenda. This is the goal. This is where they're trying to get Tennessee to. It's like there's a race for which state is the most UNESCO friendly, and Tennessee is like, I want to be first, right? So all the UN agenda stuff is coming through Tennessee, and again, it's all being brought by Republicans.
The Uniparty. Yep.
All right, now this one's really disturbing, and it's not just because the bill is disturbing, it's because when I describe it to you and then I tell you that the entire House committee, the full committee on education, every single Republican voted for this bill. The only opposition were actually, I think, the 3 Democrats on that full committee. So it passed the House Education Committee with flying colors and full Republican support. This is the surveillance bill. That's what I call it. I don't think they call it the surveillance bill. This is Jay Reedy in the House and Brent Taylor in the Senate. When I read this bill, I immediately had several thoughts. But one was Minority Report. This bill creates a minority report for every single child. It actually states that all public schools shall implement a computer-based system that teachers and staff must use to input data of early warning signs. These reports must be submitted to the State Department of Education, and if a school doesn't comply, they lose their state funding.
Good Lord. Now, who's the sponsor on this again?
This is Jay Reedy in the House and Brent Taylor in the Senate.
Okay, Jay's my rep, so we'll definitely be having a discussion. This is ridiculous.
It also comes with a $2.9 million annual fiscal note.
Good Lord.
So here's what's really disturbing. Of course, we want, if there's a child that is struggling, we want that child to get support. Nobody disagrees with that. schools are already doing that. We already do universal screeners for behavior. We already are doing, and I don't agree with these, but the school climate surveys, right? That gathers way too much data and information on our kids and their values, their family values, and so forth. This bill takes that to a whole new level because it's telling the schools, the teachers are going to have to basically constantly be monitoring and reporting on the children into this computer-based system. And the early warning signs that are going to get reported, if a child is engaging or being the victim of harassment, intimidation, bullying, or cyberbullying, making or receiving threats of violence, exhibiting signs of substance abuse, mental health issues, self-harm, or suicide ideation.
Who determines mental health issues? Who, are those teachers capable, qualified to determine a mental health issue, especially with a kid, especially with a little kid?
They're supposed to be teaching. They're supposed to be teaching.
Yeah.
So if their instructional minutes are going to be used monitoring and reporting on children, how much time are they going to have to teach or to plan? But this isn't limited to just the teachers. This could be the bus drivers too. The bus drivers now, if you see an early warning sign of a mental health issue, so a child shows up sad on your bus and is crying, do you now have to report that? It's an early warning sign that child seems stressed. Or maybe that child's, parent is ill with a terminal illness, and that child is showing signs of depression. You now have to report that.
And I've said this before. I don't know if I've said it tonight or not, but the GOP is supposed to be the grand old party, but more and more every day, it's like the damn gang of progressives. I mean, there's less and less difference in them and the Dems, at least in Tennessee. And it's just frustrating. This is ridiculous. This is communist stuff.
So in 2023, I came across there's a school system in Houston that is using AI to monitor the children. So they have AI bots. I think the company was called Davidas or something like that. They have AI that monitors the children, and in the beginning, it sets a baseline. Okay, this is normal behavior for this child, right? So maybe it's that child's getting up and out of their seat, 10 times in an hour. I don't know. And that's normal. But then the following week, when the child gets up and out of their seat 15 times, that's outside of the baseline. So anything outside of the normal baseline for that child is going to send an alert to the administrator. And all of this data being collected via AI. Now, this bill doesn't say that it's going to use AI, but is this opening the door for that? And then, even if it's not, we are opening the door for this third party, this computer-based system. And where is this data going? Who is it being shared with other than the State Department of Education? Who else has access to this data? How long does the data last? Can this data follow a child from one school to another? Can it follow the child out of the state? Can it follow the child into their, future career and impact their ability to get a job or to be admitted to a college? What are the long-term implications of collecting all of this data on our children and creating these reports? Is this going to feed into a social credit score? Is this going to be used in the new MyTN app?
I'm curious.
Where your digital ID is?
I'm curious. What do the sponsors say the purpose of this is? What do they say? What's the reason we have to have this bill?
They really are pushing the mental health and safety of children. It's all about the emotions. And your liberty, so the government can keep you safe.
Yep.
I would say, what I see is this just creates a situation where children are becoming more and more accustomed to constant surveillance and monitoring and being watched all the time and giving up their information and their data and just becoming so desensitized to that, they don't even understand what it means to have privacy anymore. And without privacy, you can't have liberty.
This is like an ongoing red flag law.
That's exactly right.
They're just waiting for something, and this is insane. So yeah. And here, Tennessee, it's a shame because we got some really good people in this state, but we only have a handful in our legislature that are not just utterly worthless, if not traitors. We only have a handful. We can't trust them with anything.
Exactly. I can count 5 in the House. That's my number.
Oh wow! Maybe I need to pay more attention. I was going to be a little more generous to the House. Senate, I was thinking 5 on a good day. But yeah, it's pathetic. I don't understand.
I was thinking 3 in the Senate.
Well, it depends on the issue. I mean, there are a few that are decent on some things and just terrible on others. But and this is disappointing too, because this is not the kind of thing that I thought my rep Jay Reedy would support. But I'll definitely have to ask him what is he thinking. But there's no justification for this. This whole mental health thing. This whole mental health thing is just another angle of control. That's all it is. This, just like the anti-bullying thing. And I knew when I first saw the bullying thing, I'm like, wait a minute. Okay, bullies have been around forever. You have to teach your kid to stand up to a bully, and you don't make a kid who's maybe a bully in school. You don't mark him for life because he was a bully in grade school. That's ridiculous.
Right. Well, I really do see a push for making our children more and more fragile.
Well, this will do it. This will definitely do it. Well, if you got, I know you got some really good news at the end, right? You got some good bill to tell me about that you think will get through?
I did not come prepared with anything to leave you on a high note. I apologize. Shame on me. I should have.
That's okay. No problem.
What I would say is here's the thing. You and I think are on the same page with this. Is all power is inherent in the people.
It's supposed to be, yeah.
Right?
Yep.
Right. It's supposed to be that way. These people are supposed to represent us, not lead us. We lead them.
Yep.
So I would, if it's, I guess, any sort of an encouragement, is start thinking about how the language that we use and how we think of these representatives. I don't condone treating any of them badly or being disrespectful or rude or nasty to them. Don't call them and cuss them out. Like, always behave respectfully,
right.
But maybe shift your thinking and realize that they really do. They are supposed to represent you. That's why you sent them there.
Yep.
They're not there to lead you. They're not there to be condescending, to tell you what you need. You can self-govern.
Yep.
Some of them can't even self-govern.
No, and they're in leadership. So if you pull down the pants of a ref in a basketball game, high school basketball game, then you can be in leadership in the Tennessee State GOP.
Or get a DUI.
Get a DUI. Hey, we'll keep you in place. Not a problem. DUI and pissing all over yourself on TV and everybody sees it. And you're still in position. You embarrass the state and you're on Saturday Night Live for your little online fling with some young gay dude and you're in your late 70s. You're okay. You're still lieutenant governor. Yeah, it's pretty pathetic. So. Well, hey, I really appreciate what you do. I thank you for coming on, and we'll definitely be in touch.
All right. Appreciate it, Dave. Thank you.
Thank you again. Appreciate it. Please be sure to hit the like and subscribe buttons as well as the notification bell to never miss an episode. We appreciate your support. Check out our audio podcast on iHeartRadio, Spotify, and other platforms as well. Sign up for our weekly newsletter at our website, tninformer.com. Please find and follow us on X and Facebook. Quick notification bill update. If you didn't hear the first one, the bill for this year, Senate Bill 479, is been put in general sub, which means it's dead for the year, but we are not giving up on the issue of nullification. And I still encourage you to visit tncss.weebly.com for more information about that. And then just some general information. One of the best sites out there, not just to learn about nullification, but to learn about the Constitution and the intent of the founders, is the 10thamendmentcenter.com. And they've got a recent article posted, or a recent podcast, and it's called The Supremacy Clause Hoax: How We Became What the Founders Fought Against. Another good, and we have this posted on our website, and another good article for you to read on our website is from the Federalist Society. It was written by a federal judge. Not a big fan of federal judges, but I thought what this guy wrote made a lot of sense. And it's a review of the Marbury versus Madison decision, and he titled it "Unbearable Rightness of Marbury versus Madison, Its Real Lessons and Irrepressible Myths." And so he lays out the solid constitutional points that Marshall made in the Marbury versus Madison case, and then he pointed out all the myths about Marbury versus Madison, to include the myth that John Marshall created judicial review, and the judicial review means judicial supremacy. So I encourage you to read that, because that's one of the more dangerous lies that we've been fed in our country, is that, you know, the Supreme Court is the final arbiter of all constitutional issues, and we're just supposed to bow at their feet when they come up with something, no matter how unconstitutional it is. Tennessee Firearms Association Day on the Hill will be March 26th. Go to Tennessee Firearms Association for more info. Also, HJR 53 is the constitutional amendment resolution that would remove the portion of our Constitution that allows the legislature to restrict our wearing of arms with a view to reduce crime. We would just flat out have the right to keep and bear arms, as we originally did. Our guest next week will be John Harris. He's from the TFA, Tennessee Firearms Association. He's one of the founding members. And here he's going to detail our state's opposition to the Second Amendment and what legislation still has a chance to pass. I hope you'll join us again next week. That's it for now. Good night from Paris, Tennessee, that is.